what did you do now?
Oh, I didn't do nothing. I'm on jury duty, Archie.
Isn't that exciting, Daddy?
Well, what's the big deal about that? They want people like your mother down there because they know they got no preconceived ideas. To put it another way, they know she don't know too much.
I just wanted to let you know about my study group.
Oh, don't be a fuddy-duddy. I'll be your study buddy.
I'm about to embark on one of the great challenges of my scientific career.
This work right here is going to change history.
I think this is going to be our greatest mission.
I don't have time to study. I'll never get into Sanford.
I got big plans for you tonight. I got maps, I got charts. I got to see you through this because my credibility is on the line.
It's at this point that you'll want to start taking notes.
Welcome to the Sitcom Study, the podcast where we contemplate the TV shows we grew up with and search for the truth and wisdom within the tropes and cliches. And Amy, what's the trope we're talking about today?
Well, Jay, I regret to inform you that you have received summons.
Summons for what?
For jury duty, my man.
Jury duty, scourge of real-life working people, and interesting plot point for many a sitcom. Yeah, we're talking about sitcom episodes where people have jury duty. So I'm going to ask you, this is something I don't know that I know the answer to because you famously have been involved in a court case since we've been together, but you were a witness.
Yes.
So I'll ask you, have you ever had jury duty?
I have not. I've received one summons for jury duty in my entire life, and it was for the week of my wedding. And it was a federal summons, and I wrote that, like, getting married was one of the things
Did you get a nuptial abstinence?
Yeah, I didn't even have to go. Like, I wrote back to them and said, my wedding is on April 2nd. Here, whatever. And they said, you're dismissed. But I didn't even have to go and show up and go through that whole rigmarole.
If only Liz Lemon knew that was a legitimate thing. You didn't have to disguise yourself as a weird Star Wars person. I have never fully served on the trial. Like many people who get called for jury duty, I've multiple times had to report to some sort of municipal building and spend several hours sitting there waiting around and then have some official come out and say, okay, everybody, you can go home. Never mind. The most recent of which was I spent my 40th birthday at the Manhattan, criminal justice center. Yeah. I went to this thing and I had, all these friends. I, as we mentioned, am not a fan of surprise parties. So I had a little get together that I was fully aware of planned at my apartment, which happened to be all the way uptown. And the building that I guess all of New York City, or at least all of Manhattan County's, jurors have to report to is way the hell downtown in the financial
City
district.
Hall, yeah.
Yeah. And so it was a little bit, I don't want to say nerve-wracking, but it was, it was kind of a crappy situation having to have company that night and knowing that I'm going to be at this official place for this indeterminate amount of time. And I did have to spend like almost the entire day sitting around this building. And then eventually somebody came out and said, the lawyers have settled the case. We do not need any of you jurors.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Well, and so I found out after I was a witness on the case that you mentioned earlier that my good friend, her husband, was one of the potential jurors. And he was dismissed from jury duty because they were reading the witness list. And he goes, I know that girl.
Yeah. That'll do it. There's always the Homer Simpson method of saying that you're prejudiced against all races. That's still my favorite line of dialogue pertaining to juries. But okay, what are our shows? What did we watch?
Well, so we had plenty of people trying to get out of jury duty, and we had several folks really excited to do their civic duty. We watched The Odd Couple, Season 1, Episode 4, The Jury Story. All in the Family, Season 1, Episode 9, Edith Has Jury Duty. Sanford, the spin-off follow-up sitcom to Sanford and Son, season 2, episode 9, Jury Duty, and finally 30 Rock, season 3, episode 14, The Funcooker.
Yeah, so you've already pointed out one of the main sort of subtropes of this is going to be people don't like jury duty. They want to try to get out of it. Now, in terms of the other big subtrope, this is going to be not our first, but second time on the podcast indirectly discussing the films of Sidney Lumet.
Yeah, that's right.
Because
12 Angry Men.
when we did our being held hostage in a bank podcast, we discovered that several of those podcasts, not only in their stories,
episodes,
but in their titles, called out the movie Dog Day Afternoon, great movie from the 70s with Al Pacino and is it Charles Durning, I think, about a bank robbery in New York City. And that's one of my favorite movies ever. Same director, Sidney Lumet, also made the movie 12 Angry Men, which I will confess I've never seen.
Oh, so I know that movie, but I knew that as a play first.
Okay.
It was a play that I read and that we were, talking about doing little scenes from, and there's several good monologues in that. And so when I heard that it had been made into a movie, obviously this was before my time. So, I had mentioned it to my parents at dinner or something, and they were like, there's a movie of that. I then immediately was like, okay, Blockbuster, let's go. And I have watched that movie several times. And one of our stars in The Odd Couple is famously in 12 Angry Men.
That was a surprise to me when I was sort of getting my facts straight about 12 Angry Men to see Jack Klugman as juror number 5.
Right.
So that is a real, I'm trying to think, what's the example where you cast the person from the actual thing in the parody?
In the
sense. It's pretty rare, but yeah.
Well, it's kind of like West Wing, right? Because you had Martin Sheen was Secretary of State or Chief of Staff or something in the American president. And then he went on to the West Wing and he is the president.
Yeah, but that is pretty wild. And yes, starting with our Odd Couple episode, this is going to be the first of several that borrowed the story of 12 Angry Men, which is simply that there's a jury that has all sort of decided swiftly that the defendant is guilty, and then there's going to be one guy, one man, if you will, that
not always
is going to be more skeptical. He's going to say, let's not be hasty. Let's, investigate the evidence more thoroughly, and is going to slowly turn around everybody to his way of thinking.
Yeah. And I mean, Henry Ford in that movie gives a performance that is, it's wonderful. I get emotional thinking about, he does such a good job just sort of portraying how difficult it is to be a person in that room when everybody is annoyed at you for your stance, but knowing that you're right and recognizing that you're pissing people off and just trying to calmly kind of continue forward in getting people to think a little bit differently. And it is the work that so often I think white people are called upon to do amongst other white people when you want to be a true ally, right? To say in white spaces, hey, let's not talk this way. Let's not allow these prejudices to continue to move forward in these ways. And so it was one of those moments for me as a really young person of what it means to show up and be righteous.
Think past your preconceptions. And two of these sitcoms are going to deal with the racial element of this. In The Odd Couple, it doesn't really have that. What it does have is, again, talk about layers upon layers and weird casting contradictions. We have the original Cuckoo Pigeon Sisters from The Odd Couple movie starring Walter Matthau and Jack Lemmon. Now, we've talked about The Odd Couple several times before, and I'm on record saying that the reason why I'm never fully on board with the TV show as good as these guys are, Klugman and Randall, I love the original Odd Couple movie with Walter Matthau and Jack Lemmon, and the TV versions just, for me, they don't hold a candle.
It feels low rent, but when you have them there with the OG Pigeon Sisters, it's kind of fun.
My favorite part of the original Odd Couple movie is the extended date scene in the middle of the movie where they bring home the Cuckoo Pigeon Sisters and Oscar goes into the kitchen to get drinks, and in the 5 minutes while he's away, Felix completely changes the mood to like casual flirtation to everybody crying, looking at pictures of his wife and his kids. And it's one of the funniest moments in movie history of all time, in my opinion. And so it is bizarre to see these new TV versions of the characters. And we've established already that the first season of the Odd Couple TV show, which does have Neil Simon in the writing credits, is sort of doing this loose retelling of the movie, The Odd Couple.
Yeah, you have the pilot episode of season 1 of the television show has an awful lot of the movie in it.
And now we're seeing another section of the movie play out here. I think this is basically the same thing. Their first date with the Cuckoo Pigeon Sisters, and they're adding in this story, which is a flashback to the day that Oscar and Felix met, all because of Leo Garvey.
That's right. So they're coming back from their date with the Pigeon Sisters, and they're sort of teeing this up to be this like clip show kind of bottle episode. The four of them come in, and Felix is like, oh, we got to turn on the news. And Oscar is like, what do you mean? We're on a date. Don't do this again. Don't ruin the mood. Like, you're not doing this again, Felix. And he's like, no, it's important. Come on, just turn on the news. And so they turn on the news, and the top story is this Leo Garvey guy is getting out of jail, getting out of prison after having served 7 of a 10-year sentence for assault. And immediately Oscar, his whole countenance changes, and he hugs Felix, and he's like,
they're on the same page.
Oh, I can't believe you remembered the anniversary. And the Pigeon Sisters are like, oh, what do you mean? You know, what is this anniversary? So now they've got to tell their origin story of how they met. Well, so right away, I'm like pinging, right? Ping, 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 ping. Because in the narration that is not in, it's taken off of this like syndication streaming version, but in the narration,
this is the only show that we have to watch on DVD because it is completely unavailable on streaming.
So they, in the narration of the Odd Couple TV show, it talks about them being like old childhood friends.
Yeah, does not surprise me at all that
there's like this continuity issue, right? And then the timeline, like the math ain't mathin', because number one, we find out that this was 7 years ago, right? Because this guy has served 7 years of a 10-year sentence. 7 years ago, question mark as to whether or not Oscar was still married, because the timeline there is he's been a bachelor for several years.
Yes, but
we
Felix
don't know.
Is newly divorced.
Exactly. So Felix 100% 7 years ago was still married, because he was married for like 12 or 13 years.
Yes, that is the whole inciting incident of the Odd Couple story writ large.
So neither of them on this jury are wearing their wedding rings.
Yeah.
Which I was like, interesting. So there's a lot of like, not really sure if this is their actual origin story. And then also later in the series, they have, there's an episode where they talk about being old army buddies as well. So, you know, we got a little like continuity, Charles in charge, Saved by the Bell. Nobody knows what happened in the last
They're playing
episode
fast
kind of
and
thing.
loose. But yes, in this particular episode, this is how they met. And I'll say, like, this episode really showcases the difference between the Tony Randall version of Felix Unger and the Jack Lemmon version.
Yes.
Because they're both, you know, you try to synopsize the Odd Couple. It's like, well, one of them's dirty, one of them's clean. One of them's laid back, one of them's uptight.
Right.
But when you drill in a little deeper, Tony Randall has this like prim and proper sort of academic kind of like professorial way about him, whereas Jack Lemmon is like a little bit of a schlub. He's just a little more New Yorky. He's a little more, I don't know. And so
he's like uptight, but he's not like successful in everything he does.
Yes, to me,
whereas Tony Randall definitely comes off as like he is very successful in his job.
Yeah, and he comes off as more like sort of affluent and hoity-toity, whereas Jack Lemmon just has this more like, to me, he's almost like a George Costanza with a little bit more of a put together.
Exactly, but not like not a jerk in the way Costanza can be.
And so this whole episode is going to be Tony Randall sort of lecturing everybody, and it just struck me as like, oh, interesting. This is definitely a story that's made for this version of Oscar.
Right,
like I wouldn't see
Felix.
I wouldn't really see the Jack Lemmon version necessarily doing this.
Coming in. So basically what happens is we don't have any trying to get out of jury duty in this. We do sort of retroactively in the sense that Oscar's whole MO is he wants to wrap this up quickly because he's got a ball game. Yes, but not, we don't get the scene where they're doing voir dire.
They don't want to be excused.
Exactly. So they're in the jury room. The trial is now over, and Oscar kind of says, hey, the judge sort of made it seem we'd be in it, or even the bailiff is like, you guys will be out of here soon. This shouldn't take you that long.
Yeah.
Shuts the door. And then Oscar kind of takes the seat at the head of the table and is like, all right, guys, so I guess we should pick a foreman. And we have one guy who's sort of playing the gruff character like in 12 Angry Men that just wants to convict and wants to get out of here and is like, I don't like anybody else. I get annoyed with everybody. And then you've got another guy playing this sort of like namby-pamby character who goes along with whatever anyone else is saying.
Yeah.
If somebody says something with emphasis, he's like, I agree, unless everybody else doesn't.
Yeah. The first guy you mentioned is Morty Seinfeld, Jerry's dad from Seinfeld.
That's right.
He's like a peer of these guys. And yeah, he and Oscar are on the same page. Like, come on, bada bing, bada boom, let's get this done. We got places to go. Very New York attitude. Just like, come on, don't bother me. Let's wrap this up. And then, yeah, this is going to be the case in many of our shows where basically everyone except this lone holdout person is on the same page. The defendant seems like a creep. In this case, importantly, the charge is that the defendant assaulted his roommate.
Yes.
Right? And so perhaps ironically, Felix is going to be constantly making the argument of we need to think about the mitigating circumstances. What could possibly affect somebody? What are the circumstances that could cause somebody to have good reason to want to assault their roommate?
Right. And so he keeps urging, number one, he urges everybody to go through like a multi-tiered voting process to elect a foreman. Yeah. Everyone's just kind of like, ugh, fine, you be foreman. And then one of the other guys is like, no, I think Oscar should be foreman.
Yeah.
And so Oscar's foreman, and that's the end of that. They don't go through the lengthy voting process. But then Felix is trying, like you're saying, trying to convince everybody to read the psychologist's report.
Yes.
He says, let's call the bailiff back in here. Let's request the transcript of the trial, and let's specifically read the psychologist's report to try to understand, like you're saying, the mitigating factors. Could it be that the roommate is just so annoying that drove the defendant to assault him?
Yeah.
And so that is what he is kind of pushing for. And everybody's like, no, you can just tell this guy's guilty. He's got crazy eyes. He looks like a criminal. He's got a record a mile long. Like, we know he's guilty. Let's get out of here. And so they take a vote. And Felix is the lone holdout.
Yes, which is going to be the pattern in many of these shows because it's straight out of 12 Angry Men. That is the setup of our justice system. For better or worse, in order to convict somebody, you need to have a unanimous decision by the jury. That's why you get these, deliberations that go on for weeks, or why you get hung juries and all kinds of things. And so we get the bailiff coming back into the room and saying, all right, everybody, day's over. The case is adjourned for now. And so you all are going to have to go to the hotel. And in true sitcom style, we get very last line of dialogue before the commercial break. Don't worry, you won't be lonely family. We've paired everybody up, 2 people per room. Right. Oscar, you have to go with Felix.
And I don't believe, because this happens in more than one episode, that they get paired up with another juror to spend the night. I bet that's not real anymore. I would be very surprised if they make strangers sleep with strangers in jury sequestration situations in today's age.
No, that seems like a sitcom-y thing to do.
I wouldn't be surprised if that was true in the 70s and 80s. I would just be surprised now.
Yeah, it wouldn't be shocking to me, but I would think that, they have some deal with a crappy nearby hotel and they just, they get a block of rooms or whatever. But yes, we get our first tastes of Felix and Oscar annoying each other. Right.
Room service is delivered by the bailiff in, I think, both situations. We get room service is brought up. Oscar gets a steak, a rare steak, which he immediately douses with A1 and ketchup, which just makes me so upset. It makes Felix immediately upset as well. And Felix has ordered like the diet menu, cottage cheese, a salad, and some other things. And then they eat their dinner, and then Oscar's like burping, and he's like, oh man, that steak, kind of upset my stomach. And Felix is kind of snarkily commenting on the side, well, maybe you shouldn't eat so much red meat, think about the vitamin intake and blah, 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 blah. And so, and then we see Felix getting ready for bed, and it's 10 p.m. and he's hanging his socks in the window and opening the window just enough to let his socks air out during the night, but not let too much air in. And they're in a shared room. It's a hotel where the beds are right next to each other. So he's getting ready to go to bed. That means lights are going out. And Oscar's like, what are you doing? It's not even 10. Like, let's play cards. Let's, do something.
Oscar is basically a gambling addict. Like, he doesn't want to stay up and like drink beer or anything. He just wants to bet on things. He's like, Felix, let's just cut the deck. I'm going to cut the deck and we'll bet $1. Right. He just wants to bet $1.
He's like, let's do something. You want to play poker? You want to play cards? Like, come on.
Yeah, but it's just like it'll satisfy him to have $1 riding on who gets the high card when they cut the deck.
Right.
And so, Felix is like, no. He's like, where's your pajamas? Which I'm definitely team Oscar here.
Right, he just wears an undershirt and his boxer shorts.
I don't think I've owned pajamas since I was like 8 years old.
Well, but that's what you wear around the house all day is basically what pajamas would be.
But Felix is just very much like he goes to sleep by the book. And Oscar's like, no, I want to stay up gambling.
He has a whole nighttime routine.
Yeah.
He takes certain pills at certain moments, and then and so Oscar, goes along with it, and he lays down and is like, all right, I'm going to try to go to sleep. And then immediately he's hearing, nah,
yeah.
Nah.
Now, I have to say, again, one of the best parts of the original Odd Couple movie is Jack Lemmon doing the when they're in the restaurant. And this is a nice sort of answer to that. Tony Randall isn't doing the same thing. He's got his own take on it, which is these really long sounds that get louder and louder. So he's just like,
He's definitely doing a ma, but the thing that he's doing that Jack Lemmon doesn't do is that he is creating pressure in his ears. He's covering his ears, and he starts the noise, the like, with it's like the MN kind of sound, building up the pressure, and then he pops his hands quickly away from his ears to like create this suction pressure to release his sinuses and his ears. And Oscar is just like, what is going on?
Yeah, and that's where, that's their dynamic ultimately, is that even though Felix is the one that's neat and does things correctly, and so in theory he would be the one that's sort of like in the right in these roommate conflicts, but that's the other thing about Felix is he's extremely annoying, because not only does he like spray down everything in bleach while you're using it, but he has all these weird allergies and maladies and stuff. He says, I need to get a lot of sleep. My doctor says, I need to be well rested because of my condition, which is hypochondria.
He goes, what's your condition? I'm a hypochondriac.
Yeah. And so you get that sense of like, okay, living with Felix, it doesn't just mean that he cleans up after you. He keeps you up all night with with these weird sounds and sinus clearings.
He clears his ear, or he clears his sinuses, but then he needs to pop his ears, and then he sprays a nasal spray up there, and then he turns the light on again for another reason, and then he's left the window open too much. He's got to bring it back down a little bit because, and it's just on and on and on. And then the next scene is the next day. They're walking back into the jury room, and Oscar is exhausted.
Yeah.
He's like, "Where's the coffee? This guy woke me up at 3:00 in the morning because it was time to close the window because it was going to get too cold after letting the window in, leaving the window open to let the fresh air in all night. There was too much fresh air." And he was just like, "I basically didn't sleep."
Yeah, they're at the water cooler. This is a good old fashioned water cooler, tea spilling with
Kvetch.
Oscar he's talking to Seinfeld's dad, his fellow juror, and he's like, "This guy's driving me crazy. Like, you wouldn't believe it. I had to room with Unger, and the guy's a nutcase." And then we basically go right back into the deliberations with Felix going, "I implore you all, read the transcript."
And now he has gotten the transcript. He's referencing it. He's reading it back to people. He's trying to get them to pay attention. And they're like, fine. You know what? Whatever. Let's take another vote. And everybody is like, I'm voting not guilty. And Felix is like, well, then I'm voting guilty.
Yeah, you're agreeing with me for the wrong reasons. It's not about placating me. It's about actually considering everything. And so that's when Oscar snaps basically and is like, "I hate you. I want to kill you right now with my bare hands. Now wait just a minute. This proves your original point." People can be, he says straight up, Felix is right. There are circumstances under which a normal law-abiding citizen will become violent.
Right.
I'm experiencing it right now.
Well, it's not just him though, right? Because it's Seinfeld's dad that actually picks Felix up by the shirt, by the lapels, throws him up against a wall, and is like, "That's it. I'm gonna punch you, or you can't make me stay here another night." Because he's like, well, Felix has made some comment about, if we're not going to read the transcript, then we're just going to have to stay here another night. And, and they're like, absolutely not. He throws him up, Seinfeld's dad throws him up against the wall. And that's when Oscar realizes, oh my goodness, this guy is so annoying that somebody would want to punch him. That's exactly what Felix is trying to tell us that could have happened in this roommate situation. So they all agree with Felix. They decide to vote him not guilty. And then we do know from the beginning that the guy wound up in prison for assault anyway.
Yeah, well, they explain that because the flashback ends with Felix telling Oscar, after all the other jurors have left, he says, "I'd like to thank you for bringing the others to their senses." They have this nice sort of quiet moment. And he says, "Oh, and by the way, I took the liberty of putting the cap back on your toothpaste just so it won't dry out or whatever." So again,
it was oozing all over your toiletry kit.
Yeah, they're years away from being roommates, but we get the first glimpses of what their relationship is going to be, how Oscar is sort of going to reap the benefits of Felix's cleanliness, but it's also going to drive him crazy. Right. And then, we come back to the present day where they explain to the Cuckoo Pigeon sisters, "Oh yeah, we acquitted Leo Garvey, but he is still a murderer because he got stuck in the elevator with Felix, and that drove him even more criminally insane."
He didn't murder anybody. He assaulted somebody.
I thought they said, I have it down at the beginning that they say to the Cuckoo Pigeon sisters, if it wasn't for that killer, Felix and I never would have met.
They do say that, but then later on they say assault.
Okay.
When they're retelling the story about the elevator incident. So basically what happens is they acquit him, everybody's leaving the courthouse, and Felix and Leo Garvey end up on the same elevator, and that elevator gets stuck, and Felix is Felixing, and he drives Garvey so crazy that when the rescuers come to get them, he has lost his mind and he attacks the rescuers.
Yes,
and
a Hannibal Lecter situation where you bite the face off of the EMT that's trying to save you.
Beats the shit out of somebody who is one of the rescuers, and so ends up going to jail for 7 years for that.
Yeah. So again, like we said, straight out of the 12 Angry Men playbook. The other little sort of trope within the trope I want to flag here is I've noticed that the whole sort of vibe of jury deliberations and the sort of mounting tension and all of that, I feel like that really, we lost something when they started having air conditioning in municipal buildings. So many of these things are about
stress, sweating,
people being hot, and you see the open windows. And certainly this is a New York set show, and that was a thing through a lot of my lifetime in New York City is, outside of a shopping mall and a movie theater, you didn't have air conditioning. It was cold in the winter, it was hot in the summer, and you just kind of dealt with it. And so we get a lot of that imagery here of the opening the windows and the guys mopping their brows and stuff, and it's this like shorthand to tell you like time has passed and things are getting more and more tense and everybody's getting more and more uncomfortable. And that was definitely on full display here.
Yeah. And it just reminds me of how, even though I am definitely an Oscar Madison, I am a Felix Unger when it comes to the opening of windows, because I am like, no, my allergies, you need to close them.
Yeah. And yeah, it's even a big deal in the original Odd Couple movie that the whole reason why they're getting the Cuckoo Sisters to come over is because they have air conditioning. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so we're seeing everything start, right? Like you said, we don't get to see any of the trial itself. We don't get to see Leo Garvey and get any sort of like socioeconomic read on him, but we absolutely have this trope of one of our characters being this lone holdout who sort of sees past the prejudices and is willing to really kind of inquire about the case more deeply than anyone else is. Yeah. All right, let's continue with All in the Family.
Season 1, Episode 9, Edith Has Jury Duty.
Yeah, All in the Family. It's a classic. Obviously, it's been a while since we talked about this. I feel like we covered All in the Family a few times early on in the podcast. Look, I feel like this show is kind of unimpeachable, but you're seeing here in this Archie Bunker, Edith Bunker relationships, definitely the beginnings of what always bums us out in the 90s sitcoms about, isn't it funny when the husband hates the wife, right?
I mean, yes, and, right? Because he doesn't hate her. He talks about her in ways that are unsettling.
I think that's, yeah.
But he loves her.
Yes, and depends on her.
Depends on her and is legitimately like distraught when she's not around, wants her there. And it's one of these things, it's like this unspoken connection. Like
extremely unspoken. Like he cannot be made to speak it no matter what.
Absolutely not. But they're like the way they play it, that there's a lot of love there, even though he's calling her a dingbat and, when she's not around.
Right. And again, I like this show, but you see how a lot of the shows that we don't like learn the wrong lessons from this. When you have Archie Bunker telling Rob Reiner and Sally Struthers, hey, they want people like your mother down at the courthouse because they don't have any preconceived notions. They don't really have any notions at all. Everything he says is just like, she's an idiot. She's a dope. What a stoop, And it's like, it just, you're exactly right that you never believe that he doesn't like her, and it reads exactly as it's supposed to, which is this is a silly, heightened version of the kind of teasing that you see in a legit, real family. And they pull it off really well.
Yeah, I think this show he's meant to be a caricature, or he's meant to be a kind of a send-up of a certain personality type, of a certain generation. And, there's a lot of things, a lot of ways that he acts that crack me up because it reminds me of my grandpa. We've talked about this before, same with your grandparents and your great-grandparents. There's a lot of pieces of that ring true. But I think you're exactly right. The thing that this show does that none of those 90s shows do is they actually have the moments where in every episode, it's not like every now and then it's heartwarming. No, you can tell how much they care about each other, how much they love each other, and how much they depend on one another. And that surface level nastiness on his part and on her part just ignoring it and being like, whatever, I'm going to do what I want anyway. Both of those things come from a different place. Whereas when you see that same thing repeated in like an Everybody Loves Raymond, there's no heart behind it. All they do is nag and hate each other.
Right. And also the difference is like in Everybody Loves Raymond and King of Queens and stuff, the wives are normal. Like the guys are just dicks to them for no reason. Whereas in All in the Family, Edith is a wacko. Like she talks with that crazy voice. She's got her head in the clouds. Like she is kind of a dingbat.
Right.
And so you kind of have a little more allowance for like, yeah, he's sort of tolerating how weird she is. And in turn, she's tolerating how grumpy he is.
Exactly. So the setup for this is Edith comes home and Gloria and Meathead, Mike, are in the kitchen. Gosh, this was hard there was a scene where they're talking about the murder.
Yes.
Because Edith is going to serve on a killer's jury, a jury for a murder trial. And there's this whole scene where Archie is saying to Rob Reiner's character, well, what would you do if you came home and you found your wife's throat slit? And oh God, I mean, just with the recent
honestly,
events.
I wasn't thinking along those lines until you said it, but yes, very macabre sort of connection to the horrible story about Rob Reiner.
And what we have, though, is that Rob Reiner's character is giving a full-throated defense against capital punishment and saying that, that putting that person to death for potentially slitting my wife's throat doesn't change the fact that my wife is dead. It doesn't fix anything, which I'm going to cry talking about it, which is what actual real life Rob Reiner and his wife fought for and believed. And so just knowing all the machinations and everything that's kind of happening with their son and the potential trial is knowing what they believed in and knowing that this is kind of coming full circle in their own lives and posthumously is really, it was a very surreal moment to hear Rob Reiner as Meathead talking about his very strong stance against capital punishment.
Yeah, totally. And in true All in the Family style, we're getting like a little, political debate in microcosm here with Archie saying it's well known that capital punishment is a well-known detergent for crime, right? Classic sitcom-y malapropism.
I would say classic Archie Bunker malapropism.
Yeah, but so they're laying out, again, like simplified sitcom style, but the basic arguments of like deterrence and the psychology behind, capital punishment versus rehabilitation and we get a little bit of that. Archie saying his point of view, Rob Reiner saying his point of view. And then we get this idea that like, oh, Meathead is actually following the news. And even though Edith is being very, very staunchly obedient to her direction to not, she says, I ain't supposed to tell nobody about the case, right? Yeah. Don't ask me about the case. But Michael is like, I bet this is the Rodriguez case, right? They know about this case. And apparently it turns out to be true. The Rodriguez case in which Mr. Rodriguez has been accused of killing somebody.
Right. And so so the beginning of the episode, Edith is coming back. She's been told to pack a bag for reporting the next day because she'll likely be sequestered potentially a week, maybe more. She doesn't know, but she is going to be sequestered. And so she's telling the family this. And immediately that's what makes Meathead start to think, oh, I bet this is that Rodriguez case, because why else would you be sequestered if it was just a little thing here and there? And then Archie comes home and he finds out about this and he's like, oh, I think I'm getting sick.
Yes,
you gotta bring me my food upstairs. I gotta call out from work tomorrow. I'm not doing well.
Yes, he
you
demands
can't take any jury duty because you gotta call the judge and let him know you gotta take care of your husband.
Yes, he wants her to just pick up the phone and call the court and say, my husband is sick. I cannot do jury duty. And this is where we get, again, a taste of their relationship where Edith is just like, okay, Archie. And then he leaves the room and she just sits down and it's like,
she hangs
I'm not
up the
doing
phone.
That.
She goes back to the table and she says to Sally Struthers, she's like, oh, will you go look for that bed tray for bringing him his meals upstairs? And Sally Struthers, Gloria, is like, what are you doing, Ma? You can't
really
do
do
that.
that?
You're really going to listen to him? She was like, no, you're going to be the one who has to take care of him. I've got to go to jury duty.
Yeah. Edith, we should mention, is like glowing about jury duty.
Yes.
She loves being involved in it. She loves, and she's going to really explain more about this later, but she just loves to be a part of this process. You know, she is the opposite of the people in some of the other shows that just want to get excused or want it to be done quickly. She's like, I am savoring being like an integral part of justice, basically.
She says later on, she's like, nobody ever cares about my opinion. And this time my opinion matters.
Yeah, exactly. And so we get, interestingly, I thought for a while this was going to be one of these things where we don't get to actually see the trial, where it's all going to be in the house and we just hear about it, because she does go off on her merry way and we get the scene of Archie eating the cold chicken wing out of the refrigerator
chicken leg,
and the beer. And he just completely is, he can't fend for himself. And we're seeing that
well, he can, but he wants to pretend like he can't. The minute he hears Meathead and Gloria come home, he hides the chicken leg in a drawer and puts the coffee or the toaster cozy over his beer so that they won't know that he has been able to fend for himself.
Yeah. And the kids, Sally Struthers and Rob Reiner, have been at the courthouse watching the trial. They're like, Dad, you would be so proud of Mom on that trial. And he's like, I'd be proud of her if she fixed me my damn dinner.
Yeah. Exactly. But then we do get a scene of Edith and another juror who have been assigned to a hotel room as roommates, and they are sitting there having their room service dinner and discussing the trial, which is a big no-no. You're not allowed to do even with other jurors unless you're in the jury room. But so they're in there and they're talking about the trial, and they're this woman. We come to realize that Edith is, like Felix, the lone holdout.
Yeah, we found that out because back at the house, Archie was reading the newspaper. He's going over the details of the case as he's come to understand them from the news. He's saying straight up ethnic slurs. Like we're getting to see like, okay, Archie is racist against Hispanic people.
Yes.
And he's explaining how this murder went down based on how he understands it. And then he looks in the newspaper and sees the jury is being sequestered because there was one lone holdout. He looks up at the camera and goes, they should have said lone dingbat, right? So he knows who it is. And that's when we cut over and we see Edith eating with this sort of like hoity-toity lady who we come to understand is also racist like Archie.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This woman is talking about, well, you know how these people are, and you know what these people are like. And this woman is, she is so recognizable. I looked her up and it's crazy to me. She was born in 1919. Her career basically ended in the mid 80s, but she has been in like 1 to 5 episodes of every old television show.
Yeah, she has the line, she says, Mrs. Bunker, I don't want to hear about your Twinkies, right? Because she's trying to explain, Archie loves his Twinkies, but we're just totally getting the picture that, she's all hoity-toity. She doesn't even understand Edith's terminology. And when they get to talking about the case, this lady's like, well, look, you heard that witness testimony. He said that he saw Rodriguez doing it. And then Edith goes, well, but you said that all Puerto Ricans look alike. So how can we believe that he even spotted him? And she goes, well, they all look alike to us, but not to each other.
Right. And then she says something about them all being liars. And Edith throws that back on her and is like, well, if they're all liars, then how can you believe
we can't believe they're because it was a fellow Puerto Rican, I guess, testifying that he witnessed this crime.
Yeah.
And so
they're settling down to go to bed. One of the that was another thing that I thought was really funny. One of the reasons Edith is not in any hurry to get off of this jury, other than the fact that, you know, she wants to do her duty and do it right. And she has this lovely little monologue about her opinion mattering and that being important. But the other aspect is she's getting room service. She gets to stay in a hotel. She doesn't have to be the one doing the cooking. And she's really enjoying, she talks about the chicken croquettes. And this woman is like, well, my chef Henri, who's French, he makes much better things than this. And this food is disgusting. And the lady won't even eat it. So it's like you're seeing this like class warfare kind of playing out right in that very room. So they're settling down to go to bed, and the bailiff comes in and is like, everybody, or somebody calls or whatever, and they're like, everybody needs to get into the lobby right now. The judge, there's been an emergency. The judge is calling an emergency hearing.
Yeah, Edith says to her roommate, because this is our second time we have roommate jurors, right? She goes, "Can I help you take off some of the creams?" Right?
Right. The woman has like
facial creams on.
Which I was noticing this woman is wearing a lot of jewelry and a lot of makeup and has her hair all done up. And she's putting on her night cream and putting on like she's going to bed. She puts it on over her makeup, which you would never do. Like you take your makeup off to put on your night creams and whatnot, but she is slathering her face up. She's going to town. And then that's when Edith is like, so can I help you take off some of that cream?
Yeah. So again, we're getting this really interesting contrast in thinking, because we have, like you said, Edith gives this big speech about how, like, I'm this nobody housewife. Nobody listens to me. I don't get to make any choices. But with this jury, with this trial, I'm important. I could affect the course of somebody's life. And meanwhile, back at the house, Archie is making an argument that I'm sure some people agree with, where he says there should be professional jurors. This whole concept of a jury of your peers is dumb. Like the whole justice system is based around like police officers that are trained and they know what they're doing, and a judge who's trained and he knows what he's doing. And then everything gets decided by these random schmucks that you bring in off the street. And it's a very interesting sort of like debate surrounding this very pivotal notion in our government about like juries should be decided by everyday people and not by criminal experts.
That's right. Not by professionals. They can hear the testimony of professionals, but you are to be tried by a jury of your peers, in quotes, because it's not always that way.
Yeah. And so then they see, you know, Archie and the kids at home see like a news bulletin where they say there has been a dramatic turn of events, and Edith comes right through the door.
Right. Yeah. That's like breaking news. The trial is over. We'll update you at the 11 o'clock news or whatever. And because it's like the lead in to the beginning of the news, you know, where they're like tonight at 11 and they tease the thing, and then the news starts. So you have to wait to hear whether or not you're about to die. And so, yeah, Edith walks in and they, you know, like mute the television so they can talk to each other. And they're like, what happened? What are you doing here? What's happened? And then
that's what the kids are like. Archie goes, I don't want to hear any more about this case. Let him make me a sandwich.
That's right. Make me a sandwich and some coffee. And he is the most pitiful. Like, oh my gosh, I was feeling so Archie in this moment because I am definitely the lazy one in this household. And I am always asking Jay to get me things. And so Edith walks in the door and he puts on this pitiful face and he's like, Edith, would you get me a sandwich and some coffee, please? And he's got these like big eyes. And I'm like, oh, that's me. That's me every time Jay walks in the room.
Yeah. And so she says, you know, basically she was vindicated because a taxi driver confessed to the crime. And so the whole case got thrown out, very much Deus Ex taxi driver, right? This all just happened off screen. We found out that the whole thing is a moot point. So,
but it turned, Edith's feeling very vindicated though, because she was right. She was the lone holdout. They interview her on the news. So they turn the television back on because she's on it, or they turn the sound back up because she's on it. And she's like, I'm sorry. The judge said I can't discuss the trial, and is saying the same thing to the, and the reporter's like, well, the trial's over now, Mrs. Bunker. You can talk about it. She's like, oh, I don't know. And then walks away.
Yeah. So interestingly, we get sort of the same situation, but instead of having that internal debate resolve itself the way it did in The Odd Couple with Felix actually swaying everybody, we get like everybody makes their argument, and then it's almost like the episode just kind of runs out of time. And so we don't get to resolve anything. We just get to find out retroactively that Edith was right to not be prejudiced.
Yeah.
And that basically it's reminding us that, you know, especially at this time, we live in a world where most people are prejudiced, like 11 out of 12 or 12 out of 13 or whatever. And so, yeah, it's going to take the sort of, you know, diamonds in the rough like Edith to make everybody slow down and actually consider the facts for long enough until the taxi driver confesses. And like we never found out what would have happened.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, they don't take us back to a jury room. They don't have, you know, Edith isn't having to stand up and make her case in front of all of the other jurors. You know, we just only are hearing that she continues to vote for not guilty when they're voting.
Yeah. But again, this episode very concisely gives us this little crash course on due process, racism,
capital
punishment. Yeah, like it just, again, like that. All in the Family was so good at that, like having this very human story where we're really getting lots of fun stuff with Archie and Edith and the kids and all that. And then on the sidelines, it's like, oh, by the way, here's like a very interesting sort of conversation to chew on and think about.
Yeah,
you know?
No, this is one of the best shows that exists, I think, that's able to ride that balance of being funny and being able to talk about, you know, important events or important topics, right? And so, I mean, this to me was a brilliant watch. I enjoyed this from beginning to end.
Yeah, really good. All right, let's move on to Sanford.
Season 2, Episode 9, Jury Duty.
Yeah, so we've talked about Sanford and Son.
Correct.
We didn't really know, at least I didn't, that this just kept on chugging along when the son grew up.
No, not really.
So what's the story here?
Okay, so the story is Red Fox left Sanford and Son to have his own variety show on NBC. And the Red Fox Variety Hour was canceled after, you know, one season or whatever, a few episodes. And then NBC that season didn't have, this was like 1980, 1979 or whatever, didn't have a single top 10 show that year.
Wow. This is before Brandon Tartikoff came in and cleaned things up.
Exactly. And so didn't have a single top 10. So they said, all right, well, let's go back to the things that have worked and let's reboot Sanford and Son. And Lamont declined to return. So they explain his absence by saying that he's gone to Alaska to work on the pipeline. So now Sanford is left to run his business by himself. And he brings in the guy that we saw at the beginning, this Texan, big, good old boy. The guy's name's Cal. He's the one at the beginning of this episode that is parking the truck so that Sanford can show up to jury duty. But so he's like the son sort of character, even though he's just this like big old Texas good old boy. And then there's also a romantic kind of relationship thing that happens. But this series was not very successful. It was a mid-season replacement both years that it ran in the 80 and the 81 seasons. And it was not, they kept moving it around. They retooled it after season 1 and got rid of a bunch of characters and tried to bring back some other old characters from the original. And it was canceled after episode 4 of season 2. So we're watching episode 9. Of the 26 episodes did air at some point, but they were aired in the summer of of 1981.
Yeah. Well, you really kind of wear it on your sleeve which character you care about more when you call the series Sanford and Son, right? And so, yeah, it makes sense that they would decide, you know, hey, look, we got the goods with Red Fox here. You know, we don't really need the Son anymore. And this episode definitely, even though you're right, there are these peripheral characters, it definitely has the energy of like, oh, instead instead of having one person to be the straight man, like on the old show, we can have the whole world be the straight man to Sanford's antics. Like, we can just put him in situations where everybody else is like harumphing around and, you know, saying, oh, while I never, you know?
Yeah. And honestly, I think the other episodes are much more about the junkyard, you know, about the junk business and all of that, and much more kind of on the old set or something similar to the old set. This just happens to be one of these episodes where Sanford is at jury duty. So it's a whole new cast of characters.
And we get the whole process here. We get jury selection.
Yeah.
We get the trial. We get deliberation at the end. So we get to see the whole process of the trial. It's interesting you say that, you know, this show wasn't super popular. I'll tell you who likes this show a lot. The people in the studio audience, right? This is like, it's such a contrast to me because I've been talking more and more about some of these shows, particularly in the 90s, early 2000s, where it's like, there starts to be this obligatory thing going on where it's like almost every line somebody's saying something that's supposed to be a joke, and so you get the audience or the fake audience going ha ha, that little sort of like general rumble of laughter, and it's just this like, you know, sort of tired back and forth. Here it's sort of the same thing where like Red Fox, a lot of the things he's saying, maybe they're not necessarily jokes per se, but the whole situation is just alive with the energy of like, they're so happy to see him. This is like if Kevin Hart at the height of his popularity walked on stage and just like it's that kind of energy from the crowd that they're just dying over everything he does and says, and you can feel it.
Yeah. I was reminding me the beginning scene where Red Fox is like walking around the courtroom trying to get out of jury duty. So this is the first time that we have this trope coming to the fore, right? The others were all interested and doing their civic duty. You know, Oscar wanted to get out of the deliberations, but there was none of this like, oh man, I got to get out of jury duty. Well, Sanford shows up and he is going to get out of jury duty, and he sees the guy in front of him in line, or, you know, being going through the voir dire. He sees that this guy is getting let go because he's not feeling well.
He's excused for a back injury.
Right.
So there you have it.
And he has all these reasons, like he's got to take care of his family. He's got a back injury. And so he can't afford the time off work and blah, 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 blah. And the judge lets him go. So Sanford gets up there and he's doing his, you know, Red Fox is walking up there doing his normal thing where he like his legs are all stiff and he can barely walk. And he gets up there and he's got his hands all like he's got cerebral palsy.
He says something like, I need this kind young man's help approaching the bench, Your Honor, you know, and has his friends try to help him up. And he gets applause for jiggling his hands.
Right.
And just for doing his shaky thing. Like the audience not just laughs, applauds.
But so what it was reminding me of, though, is there was a sketch not too long ago on SNL where Marcelo Hernandez does Sebastian Maniscalco as an attorney. And this whole little, like, you know, play that Red Fox is putting on from the courtroom, like gallery area up to the witness stand was just reminding me of that same like physical comedy.
Yeah.
So we get into it and Rhett is Sanford's trying to get out of this jury duty, and the judge is like, okay, well, you know, if you're not well, then we'll excuse you. But if I find out that you're lying, then I will lock you up.
Yeah, because he at first gets away with it. Sanford goes, oh, Your Honor, do you have any batteries? I need batteries for my pacemaker.
Yeah.
And he starts listing, he's like, well, I got dizzy spells. I got blackouts. Like, he's just saying all these things. And the judge, says like, well, so be it. And then he just like scares him straight. He goes like, if we find out you're lying, you know, we're going to throw the book at you. And it's funny how he is, again, kind of like Archie, like he's just a little kid. He's just kind of like, oh, okay, I'm not really sick. And kind of like sheepishly goes goes back to the bench.
Yep. And so then they do the voir dire, and the attorneys for the prosecution and for the defense are coming up and asking him questions to see whether or not he would be a good prospective juror. He gives some answer that indicates that he agrees that, bad guys should be punished. And so the prosecutor is like, oh yeah, I like this guy. And then we get a shot of this pretty creepy, like serial killer looking.
Yes, this is the first time we get to see the defendant.
Yeah.
He's not, I'd say he's sort of Italian if we had to nail down an ethnicity.
I mean, maybe, he definitely, like, they're going for that, like, he might be a gangster kind of a thing, but not like a high-ranking mobster, more like the hitman kind. He sort of also reminds me of the bad guy in No Country for Old Men.
Sure, Sugar Baker. Anton Sugarbaker.
He's got the like dead eyes.
Yes, he just looks kind of mean and serious. And you're right, vaguely like a sort of hitman kind of vibe. But so, we're not going to get the racial element of it's Rodriguez and people are being prejudiced against him. We're just going to get this thing of everybody sort of like decides that he looks evil.
Right. And then the defense attorney comes up and he is, very young, and Sanford's kind of laughing like, you're the attorney? Are you serious? And so, he doesn't have any objections to Sanford joining the jury. So then we go to commercial, we come back, and we're in the actual trial. Yeah,
well, we get the judge telling them, the judge reminds the jury of the reasonable doubt thing. He says, you all face a grave responsibility. A human life is in your hands.
Right, because this guy is on trial for murder, right?
Yes.
And so he can face the death penalty.
Yeah, they ask, this isn't quite as thorough of a conversation. They ask Sanford in the witness, filtering process, do you believe in capital punishment? And he goes, yeah, of course I do. I think lots of people in the Capitol should be punished. And everybody cracks up and they move on. But similar to the Odd Couple, we start our experience of the jury deliberation with they're counting votes, right? Yes. They want this to be an easy and out. Let's just all vote, and maybe we can just be, just wham bam, be done with it.
Yeah, and Sanford is on record as having said, like, this guy just looks guilty.
Yeah,
right, because of how kind of creepy he looks with those deep set eyes, and so everyone is just assuming it's going to be open and shut. Well, just like in our other episodes, there's one of the secret ballots that is not guilty.
Yeah, and that, of course, is Fred. And this reminds us that one of Fred Sanford's go-to lines of humor is, it's funny when women are ugly. Right?
Oh, that's right. He calls several women ugly.
Well, it goes into the whole case because he says that this is a murder that was inspired because the murderer allegedly was getting revenge. This was a crime of passion.
Right.
A crime passionnel or something like
they say it in French,
like Felix said back in
crime, I think. Yeah, but for criminal. But so they. You're right. The apparently or allegedly the defendant has come into a restaurant and sees his ex-wife having dinner with another man.
Yeah, and Fred's point is that the wife was too ugly to inspire murder, right? And just the audience just cracking up at like, did you get a look at that broad? And then he proceeds to start, he picks this one lady.
Yeah, they do a role play. Yeah. And so this woman who's been sitting next to him that he's had several, back and forth little banter with, she gets picked to be the wife in this role play sort of situation. And so he keeps referring to her over and over and over again as ugly. And didn't we have this exact same bit 3 or 4 times the last time we watched Sanford and Son?
I was going to ask you about it. I don't think it was the last time because the last time was
You're right. It was the time before last.
It was when he went on the airplane.
Yes.
Where I remember there was something like their motto was like, come fly the friendly skies with Daphne or something.
Yes, or something.
And he's like, where's Daphne? Why isn't
beautiful
she?
People. No, there was another time. It wasn't the airplane episode, although that did happen. There was a lot of, references to ugly women in that one too. But no, there was one of the episodes that we watched where it was like a friend came over, this woman that he has this like back and forth kind of banter relationship with. She came over. Maybe it was like one of the holidays or something, like connected with a holiday because they were going to have a dinner.
Yeah.
And he kept calling her ugly over and over and over again.
They had kind of a Martin Pam situation.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that Red just.
Oh my God, you just said that, and now I'm realizing how much Martin is doing a Sanford and Son.
Yeah, kind of. Just the way he's sort of jumping all over the place and he's kind of in a world of his own. But yeah, so Fred is sort of walking through this crime and he's revealing that he's got this sort of like crazy like a fox thing going on, no pun intended.
Like a red fox?
Yeah, where he actually remembers all these details about the crime because they're going like, so it was his wife that he spotted in the restaurant, and Red Fox is like, no, it's his ex-wife. Remember, they mentioned that detail that they got a divorce. And then
they'd been divorced 2 years at this point.
Yeah. He says, well, what obviously happened was the guy, I forget exactly what the joke is, but the victim made some joke about like you must be the dog catcher if that's your wife. Right.
Right.
And so that made the other guy leave the bar or something. And
he asks him to step outside into the alley to have a chat, like they're going to go have a fight. And so Fred posits that they didn't step outside the alley and actually fight. They stepped outside to the alley, and the defendant was like, I'm not actually going to fight you. I don't care that you're with my dog of an ex-wife.
Commiserating about how ugly his wife is.
So, we're just going to pretend like we had words, and I'm going to go back inside. And then the defendant goes back inside, and a burglar comes up and takes advantage of the victim who, while he was going to the bathroom in the alley, gets mugged and knocked over the head and dies.
Yes, and Fred remembered that they said that the victim had no ID on him, and therefore it makes sense that he would have been robbed. So he's got basically a handful of sort of facts that he remembers from the case. He comes up with this whole scenario, and we get, I'd say he's making the same exact point as Felix was trying to make, that you can't judge a book by its cover.
Right.
We can't just assume because this guy looks like a creep, he's guilty. But instead of like trying to do it through evidence and psychology, he decides to sort of punk the whole jury room.
Right.
And he orchestrates this fake stealing of this woman's purse.
Right. The woman that he's been sitting next to and that is playing in this role play, and they already don't like each other. She comes back to her seat after finishing the role play, and she's like, where's my purse? And they all immediately start blaming Fred.
Yeah.
And he's like, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You have no evidence. You just think I look guilty. And they're like, well, our evidence is that you're sitting right next to her, so you had opportunity. And the motive is that you don't like her very much. You keep calling her ugly. So there's your motive.
Yeah.
So that's why it's you. And he's like, yeah, but that's all circumstantial. Any one of you could have done it. And then spits out circumstantial evidence for like 3 other people.
He goes into a whole Hercule Poirot style drawing room scene where he's like, or was it you, the man who said that his wife likes expensive jewelry, like giving...
And you don't make a lot of money, I can tell by the shirt that you're wearing, or the shoes that you're wearing.
Isn't it interesting how this show doesn't make explicit the racial element that All in the Family does? All in the Family...
it does, but he because Sanford says, like, Fred Sanford is like, look, you haven't had to go through life with people treating you because you're differently. And all the white people in the room are like, no, that's just you. That's just something that bothers you. That's not real. I don't believe that because that's not my experience as a white person. And that's when he does the, like, let me punk everybody, because he tries to make the case that, like, no, there's prejudice in the world and none of these white people are hearing it. And so that's when he goes the other direction and is was like, all right, I'm going to prove to you that you're thinking it's me just because of the way I look. And then totally blows it at the end, because once he gets them all to realize that they have judged a book by its cover, and then they change their vote on the trial, as well as not, stop blaming Fred for this missing purse. He's like, here you go. Here's your wallet.
Yeah.
To the lady.
Yeah. He said he's declared that he's proved his point, and so he gives the purse back. And yeah, so his whole thing was like, you thought it was me, even though you couldn't prove it, but because you had no evidence that it was me,
right?
But it was me.
Prejudice, exactly. And then, but then it was me. I'm like, this is so.
Yeah. Again, it's
ridiculous.
the same concept as in the other shows, but they're not taking it as seriously. No. They're having more fun with Fred and his antics.
Exactly.
But they're sort of like, they're just treating it as kind of like, you guys need to be more open-minded, and they're not. Yeah, they're just not digging into it as much.
Well, and look, Sanford and Son, the old show was always like that. It was always more about the comedy and the ridiculousness, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It is a tough one to watch after you watch something like All in the Family that does both the comedy and hits home the message so well. It's like, okay.
Yeah, well, and they do walk it back when they announce the verdict of not guilty, and the defense lawyer is like, oh, Mr. Sanford, we heard that you were the key, holdout. My client, the defendant, wants to come over and shake your hand. And Fred's like, no, get me out of here before he starts again. And he's just like, it shows that he really does think the guy is guilty. He was just kind of rabble-rousing and trying to teach them a lesson. And, there just isn't the same conviction.
Yeah, he's still creeped out by this guy, even if he thinks there's a reasonable doubt that he didn't do this crime.
Yeah.
And I think that is something, though, that, like, if we're looking for the kernel of truth in there, to be able to do your civic duty in that way is actually really honorable, right? To be able to have personal biases, to look at a person and be like, that guy's creepy as fuck, but I'm still going to be fair. And if the evidence doesn't add up, I'm not going to use my own bias just based on what this guy looks like to make my decision. Yeah. I'm only going to go on the evidence that they gave me. And if the evidence doesn't add up, then that leads to reasonable doubt. And that means I can't convict him. And that is a really, really challenging thing that I don't know how many people who serve on juries are able to do that.
That is why O.J. Simpson is walking the streets. This idea that, it's got to be within this particular legal context. It can't just be your gut instinct about what probably happened.
Right.
And so, so we get, what's his name? Not Leo Garvey, Nick Targoni.
They say his last name different every single time they say it. Like at one point they call him Leo Tortellini.
Yeah. So
or Nick Tortellini.
Yeah, there we go. Another case in the books, and we're going to finish it up with 30 Rock.
We are moving way forward in time to 2009, Season 3, Episode 14, The Funcooker.
Yeah, we've talked about 30 Rock a handful of times. We always say, it doesn't quite lend itself to our format that much because it's so modern and complicated and it's not as tropey. I feel like at this point, I have to admit to myself that the same way that I was sort of soul searching about Big Bang Theory and discovering that I really liked it and kind of got excited whenever we watch it, 30 Rock, it's one of these shows, it's not holding up that well to me. As somebody who watched through the whole series multiple times when it first came out and was really into it, I'm finding it ends up being a little bit of a chore when we watch 30 Rock these days.
Tell me more. What makes it a chore?
I think it's that you've got Tracy Morgan is like doing this very specific thing that like I was very all in on when it came out. You know, Tracy Morgan has this one, you know, mode that's very funny. And I just thought that, you know, Tracy Morgan doing his thing was so hilarious. Alec Baldwin, sort of same thing. They rediscovered him on SNL and he has this very funny way of being so sort of dry and serious and like he has this very particular thing. And then, you know, you sort of go down the list and, you know, Jane Krakowski's character and, you know, the schlubby writers and like definitely Jack McBrayer, like everybody is just sort of like pitched at this extreme thing that is like very specific and I think was very sort of new and funny when this came out in the early 2000s. And then you combine that with, it's so fast paced. It's like doing in live action what The Simpsons was doing with animation, just having tons and tons of little scenes, having this little jazzy soundtrack that's taking you from one scene to the next. And
Doop-doop-doop-doop-pow!
Yeah, and all of that was great. And Tina Fey's whole sense of humor was sort of new and interesting. But now when I watch it with these other shows, it's like, oh, you know, I kind of miss the pace of all the other shows where it's like somebody does something weird or says something weird and then everybody else is like, whoa, Joey, that was a weird thing to say. Oh, George Costanza, this is a crazy thing that you're up to. Whereas in 30 Rock, it's like everybody is up to like 20 different weird things all the time. And there's just so much of it. It's so dense and it doesn't ever really go for humanity. It is, you know, even though they have all these storylines about Jack and Liz and their respective romances and families and stuff, it's really just trying to be funny. And so, like, I do find now it kind of wears me out and it just seems so much of its time that like everything they say, it's just like, oh yeah, Tina Fey was like, she definitely had a specific way of writing. And, you know, I don't dislike it, but now it's like, okay, like I've seen my 100 episodes of 30 Rock, you know, a handful of times now. Like I don't need to watch them again.
Well, so I have a similar experience with it. I loved 30 Rock when it came out and we turned it on and, you know, when you're watching things on streaming, a lot of times it like takes you to episode 1 of season 1 or wherever you recently left off. And so we're flipping through it and I realize I see season 1, the date pop up 2006. And I just had this moment. I was like, oh my God. This show is 20 years old. And when I think about shows being 20 years old, that feels like something from the 80s. But obviously that's not true. I'm just that old, right? And so then that was like the first thing that hit me before we even started watching the episode. I'm like, wow, this show's 20 years old. And then we started watching it. And it's exactly what you said. It's not that it's bad. It's just that it feels 20 years old. Yeah. And not in a way that like, oh, it's not funny anymore or oh, this and that. No, it's still funny. Like Tina Fey is funny, but man, can you feel the wear and tear, like the age on the jokes, the age on the style. And that is an interesting experience to have been a fully grown woman, married adult, owned a home when this show came out and to realize that it is passé.
Yeah, and it's passé in a way that, again, certain shows that were contemporaneous, like The Office or New Girl showing up a little bit later, those shows have a humanity to them that make them still, I still connect with them in a way that I don't anymore with 30 Rock.
With 30 Rock. No, it was such an interesting experience watching this. And it made me think that I wonder if, and we've talked about this with 30 Rock before, that even though it was not meant to be a binge show, it was a standard network, newfangled as it was, but it was a standard network sitcom once a week. And so I have this sort of feeling that maybe it's better in like multiple doses where you watch like 4 or 5 episodes at once and you're kind of getting into the rhythm of it and feeling more like you identify with Liz Lemon and all these wacky characters that are making her huff and puff all the time.
Yeah, totally. And in terms of huffing and puffing at the characters, that's exactly what this episode is going to be all about, right? It starts with Liz being like, I want to get my life together. I just got back from the store and I bought all these things that are going to help me.
Yeah, it's like a riff on the Container Store, which was a new thing in that era. And she calls it not the Container Store, like the compartment store or something.
Yeah.
And so she's got all of these different plastic bins that she's going to get her life organized. She's like, it's a new beginning.
Yeah, and then she gets hit by a bicyclist, cue the opening sequence, and it's basically going to be one of these sort of no good, very bad day kind of situations where there's lots of stuff going on, and those are going to provide all of the B, C, and D stories for the episode. We got Tracy and Jenna are in trouble for things that they said at the St. Patrick's Day episode. They've got a funny little Irish old guy who's yelling at them, and when they're like, oh, but we were drunk or whatever, he goes, that's no excuse, you banshee. he's yelling at Jenna. But so there's a whole story where Tracy is getting personally fined by the FCC. I remember that being a thing in the late 90s. Howard Stern getting personally fined for
using bad language.
Yeah. And so they want Tracy to clean up his act, but Tracy is too rich for the fines to affect him. And then they're like, well, we're losing sponsors too. And Tracy's like, no problem. I'm so rich. I'm going to buy the ad time. Yeah. So when you cut to a commercial, the commercial is going to be me. And
cussing even more.
Yeah. You've got the titular Funcooker, right? Which is the tiny little microwave that Jack Donaghy has invented based on Liz's suggestions. And he's trying to brainstorm names for it, right? Yes. He doesn't know what to call it. And so, yeah, all kinds of crazy stuff going on. But Siri, the assistant, reminds Suri, I guess. Siri is the one who's in your phone. Suri.
There you go.
She reminds Liz she has jury duty today. She can't do anything.
She can't do anything. She's got to leave somebody else in charge. She's got to go down to jury duty. And Liz is like, no problem. I've got my Princess Leia costume. I've got my, other random nerd stuff. They'll toss me out of here in no time.
Yeah, I'll be dismissed as a weirdo, she says.
Yes. So off she goes, and then none of that works out.
No, she goes to they sort of do a hard cut to Liz Lemon in full Princess Leia regalia in the little witness box, and she goes, I don't think it would be fair for me to be on a jury because I'm a hologram. And then, reverse shot, the judge is like, you look fine to me. Approved. And again, very true to the sort of machinery of New York. No one wants to listen to your story. Nobody cares.
And the bailiff is even like, oh, that worked for you in Chicago? Well, or she's like, you could drop the act. And Liz Lemon is like, oh, this always worked in Chicago. And the bailiff is like, have you seen the people here? This is New York.
This ain't Chicago. Look at these people.
Look at these
it's
freaks.
Just like, yes, all the random people around the municipal building are just
there are these very garish redheaded twin sisters that are wearing the exact same outfit, the exact same makeup. They were disturbing.
Yeah. So the way this episode works is it's kind of fun that the jury, the trial, is sort of like the backbone of this. But again, because it's 30 Rock, you're just kind of bopping all over the place. And so you don't actually get that much screen time devoted to it. You get all the craziness going on back at 30 Rock where Kenneth takes charge and outlaws beards and mustaches.
Yes, and immediately sends home all menstruating women.
Yes, this is kind of like a Dwight from The Office thing. He's got some sort of weird backwards religion or science thing that he believes in. And so, meanwhile, Jack is trying to get the writers to help him come up with the name for the little microwave thing. All of that is sort of incidental. The trial this time, I feel like this is the only one of these shows where we really get the trial. We get to see the actual, arguments. And the defendant is this lady, I don't know her name, but I remember her from Grease, Rise of the Pink Ladies, where she played the principal of Rydell High School. She's another one like Mindy Cohen. You get her to be your cranky old neighbor or teacher or whatever.
Her name's Jackie Hoffman. She's character actress. She's been in 1,000,001 things. But she owns some kind of like storage store or something? Or,
she runs a store. I forget what kind.
Yeah, some kind of store, and she's got like 4 or 5 people that work for her that are supposed to do like the stocking of
well,
the
she
things.
explains she supervises 12 employees.
There you go.
Who would be unemployable in any other situation.
And so she's on the witness stand explaining, it's an arson trial. And so she's on the witness stand basically explaining the arson and why she set her own store on fire.
Yeah.
And as she's explaining it, we don't know, and Liz doesn't know, that she is going to say, like, that's why I did it. And so as she's explaining that these 12 people would not be employable and all of the ways that they fuck up on a daily basis and make her life more difficult, Liz is like, oh my God, totally relating to this woman. Like, this is my life. Oh, and she's like, you can see her like, oh, yes, like, trying to subtly kind of nod and be like, I feel what this lady's saying.
People that make every idiotic, detail of their lives my problem to deal with or whatever. And this is the moment of the episode. I think this is one of my favorite, 30 Rock moments in general is, Liz just sort of staring at this woman on the witness stand who's going, I knew that it was time for a new beginning, for a cleansing fire that could make possible, a rebirth from the ashes.
I would rise from the ashes, reborn.
Yeah. And it's great. Like they just do such a great job, the writing and this lady, of just sort of, at first she's just this cranky old lady. And then she gets more and more like bizarre and zealous as she's sort of like explaining this.
Yeah. And so then she gets to the part where she's like, I'm setting the fire. And Liz is like, oh, I shouldn't be like commiserating with this woman. Oh my goodness. She kind of shakes her head. And so then, because of Liz's job, even though she has to be at the court all day long, writers work whatever hours. So when she leaves her all-day jury duty every day, she's just going back to the office and trying to clean up at the end of every day whatever mess has been made while she's
she has
gone.
Not been sequestered like our other people. Well, first of all, when she's on her way out of the jury, she crossed paths with the defendant, with this lady. And she goes like, oh, you're looking at me like I'm some kind of criminal, like I'm crazy. I'm about to go. What does she say?
This is after she gets convicted. Yeah.
I'm going to go into my cell and eat some crackers and take a nap.
That's right.
I'm freer than you are. I'm freer than you are. I guess maybe it's not the first night, but when Liz goes back to her office and she's like, just dealing with everybody's idiocy and,
Yeah, all the different storylines you described have kind of come to a head, right? So earlier in the episode, Jack's like, hey, I'm taking all your writers. You just write the show. Don't worry, it'll write them, it'll write itself.
Oh, that's a very funny bit where Alec Baldwin just sort of effortlessly tosses off like 3 solid ideas for a sketch. He's like, oh, what? You get, I don't know, Robert De Niro as an auctioneer. And then he does this like weirdly dead on Robert De Niro as an auctioneer impression. And Liz is like, that's really good.
Yeah. And so she basically has just taken those kernels of ideas, and every night she's coming back from the trial, she's been working it and writing the whole show herself. So now it's actually like show night, and the trial is over, and in the middle of the show, all these things kind of come to a head. Tracy's doing a sketch where he just goes off record and he starts, cussing, and she's like, cut to commercial. And then it's a Tracy commercial like you were talking about, and then he's cussing on there as well. And so then they come back, and Jenna's storyline is that she's doing both a Janis Joplin biopic that's unauthorized and
Jamie Jorp Jump.
That's right. And also TGS, and so she's having a hard time, so she's taking these You Never Have to Sleep pills prescribed to her by Dr. Spaceman.
Yes.
And
Leo
so
Spaceman.
that's right. And so then he comes in because his test rats have died. So he comes barging into the set and starts beating Jenna up. She's in a bear suit and like slamming her into the table, being like, "You have to sleep. You have to sleep." And then so she just rounds everybody up, the writers, like everybody, and is like, "That's it. Get into my office. We'll talk about it later. I need a minute." And she shuts her office and she goes to walk and get Jack, goes to walk away, and she sees a box of matches and she contemplates for a moment doing something.
Yeah.
And she lights a match and she looks at it and
creepy
it flickers.
music.
Yeah. And then she just kind of shakes her head and puts the match out, tosses it behind her and walks away. Well, the match wasn't totally out and it falls on her Princess Leia costume, which is all polyester.
She
immediately
pulls a
catches
Webster
on fire and actually does sort of try to burn up everyone just like the lady in the trial did.
Yeah, we learned from our Accidental Fires episode how easy it is to toss a match and have everything go up in flames.
Right.
And yeah, so she accidentally sets her office on fire.
With everyone inside, and it's like it's the fire is the door, right? So they can't get out. So then the next scene is the fire department there rescuing them, and everyone is like coming out through the axe cut hole in the door and walking past Liz being like, "I'm so sorry,
very
whatever
gingerly.
you need."
Yes, basically everyone, Jack says it, you've bought yourself a few days of, people being nice to you because everybody believes you're crazy. Everybody thinks you tried to burn this place down. You were inspired by your arson trial. And yeah, the last note is him giving her the little Funcooker, the little microwave. He tells her that it even works in the shower, so now she can eat ham in the shower.
That's right.
There's one thing I am not on board with Liz Lemon's thing.
With ham?
Ham in general, I don't get it. Like, I don't get the obsession with ham. And yes, eating in the shower, particularly eating ham in the shower, not at all enticing to me.
Well, I think the reason that it's those things together is gross.
Yeah.
Like it's meant to be like, oh, Liz is kind of gross.
Yeah, but it's weird because I feel like it starts from just sort of a Kathy-esque, like, oh, I'm,
Mondays.
or just like, oh, I like my chocolate, I like to eat cake and stuff. But yeah, it gets weird. All right, what do we think of these? Lots of good stuff here in the Jury Duty episode.
Yeah, I mean, it was we had a completely different direction in terms of what it is to be on jury duty. In the 30 Rock episode, it was much more like, I need to get out of it, and then now it's an imposition on my life. So we didn't have as much of a continuation of the tropes as we did in the first three.
Well, what we do get is this sort of 90s-esque thing, like Seinfeld or something, where the jury or where the trial plays into the main story and sort of thematically dances with it.
Right, for sure. But in terms of like the two main tropes, right, are trying to get out of jury duty and then the 12 Angry Men send-ups. Yeah. And so I think for definitely 12 Angry Men, but also just as the product of the show in general, All in the Family is the hands down best episode of these. And like I said before, I thought that Sanford was funny, but it was worn out. I wonder what that show would have been if they had done the same storyline with the Sanford and Son writers back in the early 70s, mid 70s, when it was originally on. And if it would have been more poignant and if it would have been better than it was in this sort of like slapdash, let's recreate the magic that we had 10 years ago kind of show in 1981. So that I think for that reason alone, Sanford takes itself out of the running. The Odd Couple, the Odd Couple episode wasn't as good as some of the other ones. They still had that sort of bottle episode feeling that you get in the first three, where they're like telling a story and then they leave and go to the courtroom. But again, All in the Family is doing all of those similar moves, but they're doing it better.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of agree. I think these were all pretty fun. And with Sanford, I just really like the energy. It's like I was saying, like he's not even saying jokes most of the time, but it's just so clearly
it's the
a flesh
comedy,
and blood audience. Yeah, that just he has them in the palm of his hand and he's jumping around and shaking and doing his stuff and making his dumb jokes about the fat lady or whatever. And it just, yeah, like it's got this really fun energy. But yeah, you're right. It doesn't have the substance and it doesn't necessarily have the like stamina to keep that all going. And The Odd Couple, yeah, it is fun, but I'll stand by what I said, that just like those guys are good, but I'm just not in love with them and their characterizations the way I am either with the movie version of The Odd Couple or just like certain other sitcom characters, you know, like Tony Randall's hoity-toity thing is like, okay, like, yeah, you know, B plus for me. Like it's just not my favorite. Whereas, yeah, that All in the Family just, it executes that story the best by showing, like we talked about, like having these sitcom characters sort of simply but elegantly explain the different arguments for capital punishment versus rehabilitation and, you know, the, you know, why you have to have a jury of your peers versus like professional adjudicators and stuff.
No, exactly.
And all getting into all the prejudices and the uptight lady who doesn't want to hear about the Twinkies. Like, yeah, all of that was really, really good. And having it all still come back to this human thing of Archie needing Edith to make his sandwiches and stuff. And so, yeah, that one, I agree. That takes the cake. The 30 Rock is really fun too because of that lady and because it is just, I think, an above average episode of 30 Rock, where as much as I say I find it kind of tiring, it's like everybody is doing funny stuff.
No, and that's the thing. Like, I feel like all that we said about 30 Rock, just in the fact that it's dated, it's just acknowledging the fact that it is 20 years old. It doesn't make it bad. It's this realization that things that are 20 years old that come from our adult lifetime that we have as adults really enjoyed, we've now moved beyond. Yeah.
And some things more than others, I would argue. Some things are more sort of evergreen than others.
Yeah.
All right. So much for jury duty. What are we talking about next week?
Next week, we're investigating fraud. We're doing a crossover episode with our friends over at the Fraud Complex, and we're going to watch Seinfeld Season 3, Episode 2, The Truth, King of Queens, Season 2, Episode 22, Soft Touch, and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, Season 9, Episode 4, Mac and Dennis Buy a Timeshare.
Yep, frauds, scams, all kinds of perpetrations are next week, and until then, we will consider this segment of the sitcom study concluded. Thank you for listening to the Sitcom Study. Tell us what you think or share your own TV tropes and topic ideas by sending a self-addressed stamped email to sitcomstudypodcast@gmail.com or find us on Facebook or Instagram. And if you like the show, consider leaving a rating or review on your podcast app. It helps us boost those precious Nielsen ratings. The Sitcom Study is recorded in front of a live studio dog.